The elevator doors closed with a soft ding, leaving Olivia alone with David, her senior executive. His hand brushed against hers, sending a chill down her spine. She pressed herself against the wall, her heart pounding as David leaned in close, his breath hot on her ear.
You know, Olivia,
He whispered.
I could really help you move up the corporate ladder if you play your cards right.
The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Olivia's mind raced, searching for a way out of this suffocating situation. Her stomach churned as she realized the gravity of what was unfolding. The tension in the air was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. As the elevator continued its ascent, Olivia took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. Olivia Wells smoothed her freshly pressed blazer and took a deep breath as she stepped into the gleaming lobby of Vanguard Technologies. The air buzzed with energy, a mix of excitement and nervousness coursing through her veins. This was it, her first day as an executive assistant at one of the most prestigious tech firms in the city. As she made her way to the reception desk, Olivia couldn't help but feel a sense of awe at the sleek, modern interior. The receptionist greeted her warmly, handing over a visitor's badge and directing her to the executive floor. The elevator ride seemed to last an eternity, Olivia's mind racing with thoughts of the possibilities that lay ahead. When the doors finally opened, she was greeted by a tall, well-dressed man with a broad smile.
You must be Olivia.
He said, extending his hand.
I'm David Marks, Senior Vice President of Operations. Welcome to Vanguard.
Olivia reached out to shake his hand, immediately struck by David's charisma. His steel-gray eyes sparkled with confidence, and his handshake was firm and assured. But as their hands met, something shifted. David's grip lingered a beat too long, his thumb brushing ever so slightly against the back of her hand. It was a subtle gesture, one that could easily be dismissed as friendly or accidental. Yet, it sent an inexplicable wave of discomfort through Olivia. She quickly pulled her hand away, forcing a smile to mask her unease.
Thank you, Mr. Marks. I'm excited to be here.
As David led her through the office, introducing her to various team members, Olivia found herself caught in an internal struggle. Part of her wanted to brush off the handshake incident as nothing more than her own nerves getting the better of her. But another part of her couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. Throughout the day, Olivia threw herself into learning her new role, determined to make a good impression. She meticulously organized files, scheduled meetings, and absorbed every detail of Vanguard's operations. Yet, in quiet moments, her mind would drift back to that initial interaction with David. As she sat at her new desk, surrounded by the bustle of her colleagues, Olivia's fingers hovered over her keyboard. She considered looking up company policies on workplace conduct, wondering if she should say something to HR about her discomfort. But then she paused, doubt creeping in. Was she overreacting? Making a mountain out of a molehill on her very first day? After a long moment of contemplation, Olivia closed her browser window with a soft sigh. She decided to let it go for now, chalking it up to first-day jitters and her own heightened sensitivity. David was a respected executive after all, and she was new to the corporate world. As the day drew to a close, Olivia packed up her things, feeling a mix of accomplishment and lingering unease. She had navigated her first day successfully, impressing her colleagues with her efficiency and eagerness to learn. Yet, as she made her way back to the elevator, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was missing something important. The doors slid open, and Olivia stepped inside, her reflection staring back at her from the polished metal walls. As the elevator descended, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered a warning. Little did she know, this seemingly innocent touch was just the beginning of a journey that would test her resolve, challenge her beliefs, and ultimately change the course of her life forever. As days turned into weeks, the small voice in Olivia's mind grew louder, impossible to ignore. What started as a fleeting moment of discomfort had evolved into a pattern that left her stomach in knots. Olivia found herself working late one evening, the office eerily quiet as she raced to finish a crucial project. The harsh fluorescent lights cast long shadows across her desk, her fingers flying over the keyboard in a frantic dance.
Burning the midnight oil, I see.
David said, his tone casual, but laden with something that made Olivia's skin prickle. She looked up, startled to find him standing so close, his cologne overwhelming in the confined space of her cubicle.
Just wrapping up the Johnson account.
Olivia replied, forcing a smile even as her heart rate quickened.
It's due first thing tomorrow.
David leaned in, his hand resting on the back of her chair.
Ah, yes. Important client. Mind if I take a look?
Without waiting for an answer, he bent over her shoulder, his chest pressed against her back as he peered at her computer screen. Olivia's breath caught in her throat, her body tensing at the unwelcome proximity. As David scrolled through her work, making small comments and suggestions, Olivia found herself trapped between her desire to impress and her growing discomfort.
You know,
David murmured, his lips mere inches from her ear.
I've been watching your work, Olivia. You've got real potential.
His hand slid from the chair to her shoulder, giving it a squeeze that lingered far too long.
There might be some career advancement opportunities coming up. If you're interested, of course.
The implication in his words hung heavy in the air, and Olivia felt her cheeks flush with a mix of anger and embarrassment. Her mind raced, torn between the ambition that had driven her to this point and the moral compass that screamed at her to put a stop to this immediately.
I appreciate that, Mr. Marks.
She managed to stammer, her voice barely above a whisper.
But I should really finish this project.
David chuckled, a low sound that made Olivia's stomach churn.
Of course. Don't let me keep you.
He straightened up, his hand trailing across her back as he stepped away.
Just remember, Olivia, I can be a powerful ally or a formidable obstacle. The choice is yours.
With that, he sauntered away, leaving Olivia alone with her racing thoughts and the echo of his words. She sat frozen, her hands trembling over the keyboard as she tried to process what had just happened. The weight of the decision before her pressed down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. Olivia's mind whirled with conflicting emotions. The logical part of her brain urged her to report the incident, to nip this behavior in the bud before it could escalate further. But another voice, one fueled by fear and ambition, whispered doubts and rationalizations. What if she was misinterpreting things? What if reporting this derailed her entire career? As she finally packed up her things hours later, the office dark and silent around her, Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that she was at a crossroads. The weight of her indecision settled on her shoulders, a burden she would carry home and into the days to come. She knew that whatever choice she made now would set the course for her future, both personally and professionally. The question was, could she live with the consequences of either path? Olivia's heart raced as she approached the elevator, her eyes darting nervously around the lobby. The weight of her silence grew heavier with each passing day, but nothing could have prepared her for what awaited her in the elevator. As the doors slid shut, trapping her with David, she realized that her worst fears were about to become reality. The familiar ding of the elevator arriving on the ground floor echoed through the lobby. Olivia stepped inside, pressing the button for the 14th floor. Just as the doors began to close, a hand shot out, stopping them. David Marks stepped in, his imposing figure filling the small space. David's voice was low and smooth as he greeted her, his body angled towards her in the confined space. The air felt thick, charged with an uncomfortable energy that made it hard to breathe. As they passed the 5th floor, David took a step closer, mentioning career advancement opportunities in a whisper. Olivia's mind raced, her fight-or-flight response kicking into overdrive. She was trapped, the elevator suddenly feeling more like a cage than a means of transportation. Her eyes darted to the emergency button, wondering if she should press it. In that moment, something inside Olivia snapped. The fear and anxiety that had been building for weeks crystallized into a sudden, fierce anger. She turned to face David, her eyes blazing.
No,
She said firmly, her voice stronger than she felt.
this is not okay, Mr. Marks. Your behavior is completely inappropriate and unwelcome. I'm asking you to stop right now.
David's eyes widened in surprise, clearly not expecting such a direct rejection. For a moment, he seemed at a loss for words. Then, his expression hardened, a cold smile spreading across his face.
Come on now, Olivia.
He said, his tone patronizing.
I'm just trying to be friendly. No need to overreact.
But Olivia stood her ground, her newfound resolve giving her strength.
This isn't friendship, Mr. Marks. It's harassment. And if it continues, I will report it.
The elevator dinged, signaling their arrival at the 14th floor. As the doors opened, Olivia pushed past David, her legs shaking, but her head held high. She strode towards her desk, leaving a stunned David in her wake. As she sat down, Olivia's hands trembled as the adrenaline began to wear off. She had done it. She had stood up to him. But even as a small sense of triumph washed over her, a new fear began to take root. How would David retaliate? What would this mean for her future at Vanguard? Little did Olivia know, this confrontation was just the beginning. In the weeks that followed, David's behavior would escalate, becoming more brazen and dangerous. The once promising career opportunity at Vanguard had transformed into a daily nightmare, with Olivia caught in a web of fear, guilt, and uncertainty. How long could she endure this, and at what cost to her mental and emotional well-being? Olivia sat alone in the corner of the company cafeteria, pushing her salad around with a fork. The constant state of alertness had stolen her appetite, leaving her exhausted and on edge. She glanced up, scanning the room for any sign of David, her body tensing at the mere thought of another encounter. As she contemplated leaving early, a hushed conversation from the table behind her caught her attention. Two women, their voices low and urgent, were discussing someone in the office. Olivia's heart raced as she heard David's name.
I saw him cornering the new intern in the copy room yesterday.
One woman whispered.
It's just like what happened with Jessica last year.
How many women need to leave before HR takes action?
The other replied, her voice tight with frustration.
Olivia's mind reeled as the implications sank in. She wasn't alone. David's predatory behavior was a known secret, whispered about in corners and behind closed doors. The relief of validation was quickly overshadowed by a wave of nausea. How long had this been going on? How many victims had there been before her? As she listened, her world seemed to shrink, the once promising opportunity at Vanguard transforming into a gilded cage. The women spoke of other executives who turned a blind eye, of HR representatives who prioritized the company's image over employee safety. With each word, Olivia felt the weight of a systemic problem that ran deep within Vanguard's culture. A third woman joined the conversation, her tone heavy with implication.
I heard Lisa from accounting is leaving next week. Apparently, she had a disagreement with David about her performance review.
The pieces clicked into place. The high turnover rate in certain departments, the hushed whispers that stopped when she entered a room, it all pointed to a pervasive issue that had been allowed to fester unchecked. With trembling hands, Olivia pulled out her phone and opened her notes app. She began to type, documenting every interaction she'd had with David, every uncomfortable moment and inappropriate touch. As she wrote, a plan began to form in her mind. She couldn't be the only one with evidence. If she could find others willing to speak up, to share their stories, the weight of responsibility settled on her shoulders, heavy, but somehow less suffocating than the burden of silence she'd been carrying. Olivia knew the road ahead would be difficult. She risked her job, her reputation, and potentially her future in the industry. But as she looked around the cafeteria, at the faces of women who might have suffered as she had, she knew she couldn't stay quiet any longer. As she gathered her things to leave, Olivia's resolve strengthened. She would find a way to expose the truth, to break the cycle of abuse that had been allowed to flourish in the shadows. It wouldn't be easy, and the path forward was fraught with danger. But for the first time since that fateful elevator ride, Olivia felt a glimmer of hope. She wasn't alone in this fight, and together, they might just have a chance at justice. Olivia's determination ignited a fire within her as she closed her apartment door that evening. Her living room transformed into a war room, her laptop the centerpiece of a battle strategy that would unfold over the coming weeks. With trembling fingers, Olivia opened a new document titled Incident Log. The blank page stared back at her, a canvas awaiting the painful strokes of her experiences. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for the task ahead. One by one, she began to recount every uncomfortable encounter with David, each memory a dagger to her psyche. The quiet tapping of keys filled the room as Olivia worked late into the night. She combed through months of emails, searching for any hint of David's inappropriate behavior. A casual, "Great job on that presentation," followed by an invitation for a private meeting, took on a sinister undertone. She uncovered text messages that crossed professional boundaries and calendar invites for one-on-one meetings that made her skin crawl. As the nights wore on, Olivia's apartment became a fortress of evidence. Post-it notes covered her walls, a visual timeline of David's escalating behavior. She annotated printed emails with her recollections, creating a damning paper trail that painted a clear picture of harassment. The emotional toll weighed heavily on Olivia. There were nights when she found herself curled up on the couch, tears streaming down her face, as the full impact of what she had endured hit her anew. But with each tear shed, her resolve only strengthened. Olivia knew the risks she was taking. Every time she accessed her work email from home or saved a document to her personal drive, a jolt of fear shot through her. The potential consequences loomed large in her mind, but remaining silent was no longer an option she could live with. As she compiled her evidence, Olivia recalled advice from legal experts. She included specific dates, times, and locations for each incident, noted potential witnesses, and focused on describing David's actions and words without editorializing. Weeks passed, and Olivia's document grew into a comprehensive dossier. As she reviewed her work, a mix of pride and apprehension washed over her. She had given voice to her experiences, transformed her pain into something tangible and undeniable. The thought of confronting HR filled her with dread. She knew the horror stories of women who had come forward only to be disbelieved, or worse. Yet, as she looked at the mountain of evidence before her, Olivia knew she couldn't keep this to herself any longer. With a deep breath, Olivia made her decision. It was time to report David to HR. She would present them with her meticulously gathered evidence and demand action. As she prepared for bed that night, a strange calm settled over her. It was the calm before the storm, she realized, the last moment of quiet before she unleashed a tempest that would shake Vanguard to its core. Little did Olivia know, as she drifted off to sleep, that her journey was far from over. The battle ahead would test her in ways she couldn't imagine, pushing her to the limits of her strength and resolve. But for now, she slept, the weight of secrets lifted from her shoulders, replaced by the armor of truth she had forged in the quiet of her apartment. Olivia's heart pounded as she stood before the frosted glass door, bearing the nameplate, Human Resources. Her palms were slick with sweat, threatening to loosen her grip on the folder containing weeks of meticulously gathered evidence. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead. This was it, the moment she'd break her silence and seek justice. As she entered the office, Olivia was greeted by Sandra, the HR representative. Sandra's smile seemed warm, but there was something in her eyes that made Olivia uneasy.
"What can I do for you today, Olivia?"
Sandra asked, gesturing for her to take a seat. Olivia's voice trembled as she began to recount her experiences with David. She detailed the inappropriate touches, the suggestive comments, the veiled threats. With each word, she felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. But as she spoke, she noticed Sandra's expression shifting from concern to something resembling skepticism. When Olivia finished her account and presented her folder of evidence, Sandra's response was not what she had expected.
"Olivia,
Sandra began, her tone measured.
these are very serious allegations. Are you sure you're not misinterpreting David's actions?"
The words hit Olivia like a physical blow. She blinked, struggling to process what she was hearing.
Misinterpreting?
She echoed, disbelief coloring her voice.
I have documentation, emails, texts.
Sandra held up a hand, cutting her off.
"I understand you feel uncomfortable, but we need to be careful about making accusations without concrete proof. David is a valued member of our executive team."
Olivia felt as if the floor had dropped out from beneath her. She had expected support, action, protection. Instead, she was being questioned, doubted, even blamed. As Sandra continued to speak, asking pointed questions about Olivia's interactions with David, a horrifying realization began to dawn. HR wasn't here to help her. They were here to protect the company, and by extension, David. As the meeting drew to a close, Sandra's tone softened, but her words offered no comfort. "We'll look into this, Olivia," she said, sliding the folder of evidence into a drawer. "But I would advise you to be careful about discussing these allegations further." Olivia left the HR office in a daze, her mind reeling from the encounter. The hallway seemed to stretch endlessly before her, the fluorescent lights suddenly harsh and unforgiving. She had taken an enormous risk in coming forward, and in return, she had been dismissed, doubted, and subtly threatened. As she made her way back to her desk, Olivia felt a profound sense of isolation descend upon her. The office bustled around her, colleagues chatting and laughing, oblivious to the battle she was fighting. She sank into her chair, her eyes burning with unshed tears. The realization hit her with crushing force. She was alone in this fight. The very system meant to protect her had instead become another obstacle to overcome. Olivia stared at her computer screen, the cursor blinking mockingly as she contemplated her next move. The path forward was unclear, fraught with danger and uncertainty. But one thing was certain. Her journey was far from over. The betrayal she had just experienced was not the end, but rather the beginning of a new, more treacherous chapter in her quest for justice. Olivia returned to her desk, the office atmosphere shifting imperceptibly. Once friendly faces now appeared guarded, eyes darting away when she looked in their direction. Her complaint to HR had set off a ripple effect, threatening to engulf her entire world. The days that followed her meeting with Sandra blurred into a haze of uncomfortable silences and whispered conversations. Olivia found herself hyper-aware of every interaction, scrutinizing each gesture and word for hidden meanings. When she entered the break room, conversations suddenly shifted to mundane topics, leaving her with the distinct impression that she had interrupted something important. Doubt began to creep into Olivia's mind. Had she overreacted? Was she really just misinterpreting David's actions, as Sandra had suggested? The seed of uncertainty planted during that fateful meeting began to take root, threatening to choke out her resolve. Olivia, once confident and outgoing, found herself shrinking into her shell. She began to eat lunch at her desk, avoiding the cafeteria where she had overheard whispered conversations about David's past behavior. Team meetings became an exercise in endurance, the weight of unspoken judgments pressing down on her. As weeks dragged on, Olivia found herself constantly on edge, jumping at every email notification, dreading each meeting invitation. Her eyes scanned the room, searching for a sympathetic face, a potential ally in this increasingly hostile environment. But each time, she was met with averted gazes or blank expressions. The question that had been niggling at the back of her mind since that day in HR's office now consumed her thoughts. Should she just quit? The idea of walking away from her dream job was devastating, but as she sat at her desk, feeling the weight of unseen eyes upon her, Olivia wondered if it might be her only option. One particularly difficult afternoon, as Olivia sat staring blankly at her computer screen, she overheard two colleagues whispering nearby. "I heard she made it all up," one voice hissed, trying to sleep her way to the top, and when it didn't work, she cried harassment. The words cut through her like a knife, confirming her worst fears about how she was now perceived. Tears pricked at her eyes as she gathered her things, deciding to leave early for the day. As she walked towards the elevator, her vision blurred by unshed tears, Olivia collided with someone rounding the corner.
I'm so sorry.
She mumbled, not daring to look up.
Olivia?
A familiar voice said.
Are you okay?
She glanced up to see Sarah, one of the women she had overheard in the cafeteria weeks ago, looking at her with concern. For a moment, Olivia hesitated, years of professional detachment warring with her desperate need for connection. Olivia began, her voice catching, and then, like a dam breaking, words began to pour out.
No, I'm not okay. I don't know what to do. I thought I was doing the right thing, but now everyone hates me and I don't know if I can stay here anymore.
Sarah's eyes widened with understanding, and she gently guided Olivia to a nearby conference room. As the door closed behind them, shutting out the hostile world of the office, Olivia felt a tiny spark of hope ignite in her chest. Perhaps, in this moment of chance, she had found the ally she so desperately needed. The annual Vanguard Technologies Gala pulsed with energy, the hotel ballroom awash in glittering lights and the soft clink of champagne flutes. Olivia stood near the edge of the room, her fingers wrapped tightly around her glass as she surveyed the crowd. She had debated not coming, but Sarah had convinced her it would look suspicious if she skipped the company's biggest event of the year. As executives and their partners twirled on the dance floor, Olivia couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Her eyes darted nervously, constantly searching for David in the sea of faces. She had managed to avoid him for weeks, but in this confined space, a confrontation seemed inevitable. The alcohol flowed freely, inhibitions lowering with each passing hour. Olivia watched as her colleagues became looser, louder, their laughter taking on a reckless edge. She thought of the power dynamics at play, how the combination of alcohol and professional hierarchy could create dangerous situations. As if summoned by her thoughts, David materialized beside her, his eyes gleaming with an unsettling intensity.
Olivia,
He said, his voice low and controlled.
I've been looking for you. We need to discuss your future at Vanguard.
Olivia stiffened, her heart racing as she tried to step away, but David moved closer, blocking her path.
I've been reviewing your work.
He continued, his tone deceptively casual.
I'm not sure you're meeting our expectations. Perhaps we should discuss this in private.
The room seemed to shrink, the noise of the party fading to a dull roar in Olivia's ears. She could feel the eyes of her colleagues on them, curious glances quickly averted when she met their gaze. No one was going to help her.
Mr. Marks,
Olivia began, her voice trembling.
this isn't the time or place for a performance review.
David's smile didn't reach his eyes.
Oh, I think it's the perfect time. After all, your future here hangs in the balance. Unless, of course, you're willing to be more cooperative.
In that moment, something inside Olivia snapped. All the fear, all the anger, all the frustration of the past months came crashing down like a tidal wave. With a strength she didn't know she possessed, she raised her voice, drawing the attention of everyone nearby.
No!
She shouted, her words ringing out clear and strong.
I won't be intimidated or threatened. Your behavior is unacceptable, and I won't stand for it anymore.
The room fell silent, all eyes turning to the unfolding drama. David's face contorted with rage, his mask of civility slipping away.
You ungrateful little...
He snarled, reaching for her arm.
But Olivia was ready. She stepped back, her voice steady as she addressed the shocked onlookers.
This man has been using his position to harass and threaten employees. I've tried to handle it quietly, but no more. We deserve a safe workplace.
The aftermath was chaos. Security intervened, pulling David away as he shouted threats. Olivia stood her ground, her chest heaving as she faced the sea of stunned faces. Some looked away in shame. Others whispered furiously to their neighbors. But a few, a precious few, met her gaze with understanding and support. As the adrenaline began to fade, the full weight of what she'd done hit Olivia. She had crossed a line, one there was no coming back from. But as she looked around the room, at the mixture of shock, admiration, and guilt on her colleagues' faces, she realized something profound. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The silence had been shattered, and in its wake, a new chapter was about to unfold. Olivia straightened her shoulders, ready to face whatever came next. She had found her voice, and she would never let it be silenced again. Olivia stepped into the office on Monday morning, the air crackling with tension. Conversations hushed as she passed, only to erupt into furious whispers in her wake. Her colleagues' faces were a mix of shock, curiosity, and something that looked unsettlingly like pity. The gala confrontation had spread like wildfire, igniting a blaze of gossip that threatened to consume her. As she settled at her desk, Olivia's computer pinged with a new email. Her heart sank as she read the message. An immediate summons to the executive boardroom. With trembling hands, she gathered her things and made the long walk to what felt like her own execution. The boardroom was filled with stern-faced executives, their expressions unreadable. At the head of the table sat CEO Richard Thompson, his steely gaze fixed on Olivia as she took her seat. The tension in the room was palpable, thick enough to choke on.
Ms. Wells,
Thompson began, his voice cold and measured.
we've called this meeting to discuss your actions at the company gala.
What followed was a barrage of accusations, each one striking Olivia like a physical blow. She was called unprofessional, disruptive, a liability to the company's reputation. As the tirade continued, Olivia felt a sickening realization settle in her stomach. Her career at Vanguard was over.
Your behavior was completely unacceptable.
Spat Janet from marketing, her eyes narrowed.
Do you have any idea how much damage you've caused to the company's image?
As the accusations flew, Olivia felt a strange calm settle over her. The fear and uncertainty that had plagued her for months gave way to a steely resolve. She knew that whatever happened in this room, she had done the right thing. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was steady and clear.
I understand that my actions at the gala were unexpected,
Olivia said, meeting each executive's gaze in turn.
but I want to be clear, I stand by what I did. David Marks has been harassing me for months, and I have documentation to prove it.
Her words were met with stunned silence. For a moment, Olivia allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, they would listen. But Thompson's next words shattered that illusion.
Ms. Wells, your services at Vanguard Technologies are no longer required. You're fired, effective immediately. Please clear out your desk and leave the premises.
As Olivia packed up her belongings, the full weight of what had happened began to sink in. Colleagues watched in silence as she made her final walk through the office, box in hand. Some looked away in shame, others whispered behind their hands. But a few brave souls met her eyes, offering small nods of respect or whispered words of support. Outside the building, Olivia's phone buzzed incessantly with notifications. Social media was ablaze with discussions about her confrontation, her name trending in industry circles. She scrolled through a mix of supportive messages and vicious attacks, her stomach churning with each swipe. As she hailed a cab, Olivia's mind raced with new challenges. How would she pay her rent without a job? Would other companies in the industry blacklist her? And most pressingly, how would she navigate the legal battle that now loomed on the horizon? The cab pulled away from the curb, leaving behind the gleaming tower of Vanguard Technologies. Olivia's hands shook as she opened her email, finding a message from a local women's rights organization offering support and resources. Another email caught her eye, a request for an interview from a prominent tech magazine. Olivia's heart pounded as she realized the scope of what lay ahead. The aftermath of her bravery was daunting, but it had ignited a fire within her that would not be easily extinguished. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about every person who had ever been silenced by fear and intimidation. As the city rushed by outside the cab window, Olivia took a deep breath, steeling herself for the fight ahead. The city lights blurred through Olivia's tears as the cab wove through traffic. She had spoken her truth, but at what cost? A chance encounter was about to transform her moment of despair into a rallying cry for change. Olivia stumbled out of the cab, her box of personal belongings clutched tightly to her chest. The weight of her defeat pressed down on her, making each step feel like wading through quicksand. She had lost everything: her job, her reputation, her future. The cruel irony of being punished for standing up against harassment wasn't lost on her, but that knowledge did little to ease the ache in her chest. As she trudged down the sidewalk, her mind a whirlwind of regret and uncertainty, a gust of wind whipped a flyer against her leg. Annoyed, Olivia bent to remove it, but the bold words at the top caught her eye. "Stand up against workplace injustice!" She paused, her fingers tracing the outline of a phoenix rising from ashes, the symbol of rebirth and renewal. For a moment, Olivia stood frozen on the sidewalk, the flyer trembling in her hands. The familiar voice of doubt whispered in her ear, urging her to let it go, to accept defeat and move on. But as her eyes scanned the information about a local women's rights organization, a spark of defiance flickered to life in her chest. By the time Olivia reached her apartment, a decision had crystallized in her mind. She couldn't let Vanguard win. She couldn't let David Marks continue his predatory behavior unchecked. And most importantly, she couldn't let her silence enable a system that punished victims for speaking out. Olivia began her search for legal representation, reaching out to attorneys specializing in employment law and whistleblower protection. As she made call after call, her determination wavered. Many lawyers hesitated to take on a case against a company as powerful as Vanguard, citing the immense resources they would bring to bear in their defense. Just as Olivia's resolve began to crumble, she stumbled upon a name that would change everything. Alex Martinez, a firebrand attorney known for taking on seemingly unwinnable cases against corporate giants. Martinez's reputation preceded them, a no-nonsense approach to justice that had earned them both admirers and enemies in equal measure. With trembling fingers, Olivia dialed the number. As she waited for someone to pick up, her mind raced with possibilities. The voice that answered was brusque, but not unkind.
Martinez Legal, how can I help you?
Olivia took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead.
My name is Olivia Wells.
She began, her voice growing stronger with each word.
I need to speak with Alex Martinez about a workplace harassment case against Vanguard Technologies.
There was a pause on the other end of the line, and for a moment, Olivia feared she had made a mistake. But then the receptionist spoke again, her tone noticeably different.
Ms. Wells, I think Mr. Martinez will want to speak with you directly. Can you hold for a moment?
As Olivia waited, her heart pounding in her chest, she realized that this was more than just a phone call. It was the first step on a journey that would challenge everything she thought she knew about justice, courage, and her own strength. The legal battle ahead would be long and difficult, but Olivia was no longer just a victim. She was a fighter, ready to take on Vanguard and the system that had failed her. Olivia stepped into Alex Martinez's office, unaware that her personal story was just the beginning of a much larger, more sinister issue at Vanguard. The office buzzed with energy as Alex pored over the meticulously gathered evidence, their expression hardening with each passing moment.
Olivia,
Alex said, looking up from the files.
this is a strong start, but we need more. To take on a company like Vanguard, we need an airtight case. We need to prove this extends beyond your experience.
Olivia nodded, her heart sinking. The thought of digging deeper into her trauma made her chest tighten.
What do we do next?
She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Alex leaned back, fingers steepled in thought.
We need corroborating witnesses, other victims, bystanders, anyone who can back up your story and show a pattern of behavior.
The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Olivia reached out to former colleagues, her voice shaking as she explained her situation. Many doors were slammed in her face, the fear of retaliation palpable. But as she persevered, small cracks began to appear in Vanguard's facade. A hesitant intern admitted to similar experiences with David, a former employee who had left abruptly cited personal reasons that now took on a darker meaning. With each new piece of evidence, the true scope of the problem began to emerge. Olivia found herself reliving her own experiences in excruciating detail. There were nights when she woke up in a cold sweat, David's voice echoing in her ears. But with each painful recollection came a renewed determination to see justice done. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A quiet woman from accounting reached out with a trembling voice.
I saw your post online,
she said.
I think I might have some information that could help.
What followed was a flood of revelations that left Olivia reeling. The woman had been keeping detailed records of harassment incidents across multiple departments for years. Names, dates, locations, all meticulously documented in a hidden spreadsheet. The problem extended to several high-level executives, creating a toxic culture that permeated the entire company. As Alex reviewed the new evidence, their eyes lit up with fierce determination.
This is it, Olivia,
they said, their voice tight with controlled excitement.
We're looking at a systemic failure, a culture of harassment that goes all the way to the top. With this, we can show that Vanguard failed to protect its employees and fostered an environment where abuse could thrive.
Olivia sat back, her mind spinning with the implications. What had started as her personal fight for justice had uncovered a web of corruption and abuse that spanned the entire company. The road ahead would be difficult, fraught with legal challenges and personal attacks. But as she looked at the mountain of evidence before her, Olivia felt a surge of hope. They had found their smoking gun. Now, it was time to make Vanguard answer for its sins. Olivia's heart raced as she stared at the cryptic email on her screen. The subject line read simply, "I can help." The message itself was equally vague, promising evidence that would expose Vanguard's darkest secrets. Her finger hovered over the delete button, years of corporate training screaming at her to report this potential security breach.
Alex?
She called out, her voice tight with uncertainty.
You need to see this.
Alex Martinez strode over, their brow furrowing as they read the mysterious message.
It could be a trap, they mused, fingers drumming on the desk. Vanguard's legal team would love to catch us doing something unethical.
Olivia nodded, the weight of their decision pressing down on her.
But if it's genuine, this could be the break we need.
They debated for hours, weighing the risks against the potential rewards. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across Alex's office, they reached a decision. "We'll meet," Alex said, their voice firm, "but on our terms, with precautions in place." The rendezvous was set for midnight in a deserted parking garage. Olivia's palms were slick with sweat as she and Alex waited, every shadow seeming to conceal a potential threat. A figure emerged from the darkness, face obscured by a hood. As they stepped into the dim light, Olivia gasped. She recognized him, Robert Chen, Vanguard's chief financial officer.
"I can't do this anymore,"
Robert said, his voice barely above a whisper.
"The things I've seen, the conversations I've been part of, it's eating me alive."
Robert revealed a world of corruption that went beyond anything Olivia had imagined. He spoke of executive meetings where harassment complaints were dismissed with cruel laughter, of systematic efforts to discredit victims, and of a toxic culture that ran deep within the company.
"I have recordings,"
Robert said, pulling out a small USB drive.
"Board meetings, private conversations, they thought they were untouchable."
As Alex examined the drive, Olivia's mind raced with the implications. Robert's voice shook as he continued.
"There's a recording from last week's emergency board meeting. They're planning to destroy evidence, to buy off or threaten anyone who might speak out against them."
Olivia felt a chill run down her spine. The evidence they now possessed could bring Vanguard to its knees, but it also made them targets. As they parted ways, Robert's final words hung in the air.
"Be careful. They'll stop at nothing to keep this quiet."
Back at the office, Alex and Olivia worked through the night, poring over the evidence. In one particularly chilling recording, David Marks could be heard clearly. "We can't let these bitches bring down everything we've built. Whatever it takes, make this go away." As the first rays of dawn streaked across the sky, Olivia sat back, exhausted but exhilarated. They had done it. With this evidence, there was no way Vanguard could escape responsibility.
Alex,
She said, her voice filled with a mix of hope and trepidation.
what happens now?
Alex's eyes gleamed with determination.
Now, Olivia, we make sure this never happens to anyone else again.
Alex's words lingered, a spark of hope in the darkness. The plan to expose Vanguard's toxic culture was set in motion, a cascade of truth poised to flood every news outlet in the country. Olivia's heart raced as she braced for the impending storm. The first headline struck like lightning. Vanguard Technologies, a culture of harassment exposed. Within hours, the story consumed every media channel. Olivia watched, transfixed, as journalists dissected the evidence she and Alex had meticulously gathered. The once secret recordings of executive meetings now played on loop, their damning content laid bare for all to see. Vanguard's retaliation was immediate and fierce. A torrent of carefully crafted statements inundated the media, portraying Olivia as a vengeful ex-employee. Their PR machine churned out loyal testimonials, attempting to cast doubt on the leaked evidence. Each accusation felt like a dagger to Olivia's heart. Seeing her face plastered across screens, labeled with words like liar and opportunist, chipped away at her resolve. But Alex remained her anchor, reminding her of the strength of their case and the importance of their fight. As the media frenzy intensified, an unexpected wave of solidarity emerged. Women from diverse backgrounds, inspired by Olivia's courage, began sharing their own stories of workplace harassment. The movement gained momentum, with hashtag Women Against Vanguard trending across social platforms. Olivia marveled at the power of collective voices. She recalled studies showing how high-profile cases could lead to significant increases in harassment reporting. The silence was shattering, one voice at a time. The backlash, however, was equally fierce. Vanguard's supporters launched vicious online attacks. Death threats flooded Olivia's inbox, and paranoia crept into her daily life. There were moments when she questioned if the fight was worth the cost. Yet, for every hateful message, A chorus of support rose to meet it. Women she had never met sent words of encouragement, sharing how her story had empowered them to speak up. Men reached out too, pledging to be better allies in the workplace. As public opinion shifted, Vanguard's carefully constructed facade began to crumble. Shareholders demanded answers, and business partners distanced themselves. The hashtag #BoycottVanguard gained traction, striking at the tech giant's bottom line. In a surprising turn, a group of current Vanguard employees staged a walkout. The image of hundreds in Vanguard's signature blue shirts, holding signs that read, "Believe Women" and "No More Silence," became the movement's rallying symbol. The battle was far from over. The courtroom showdown loomed on the horizon. But as Olivia stood before a sea of supporters at a #WomenAgainstVanguard rally, their voices raised in unison, a surge of hope filled her chest. For the first time since that fateful day in the elevator with David, she truly believed that change was possible. The media storm had cleared the way for a new dawn, one where silence would no longer be the price of success. The courtroom buzzed with tension as Olivia took her seat, her heart racing but her steps steady. This was the moment where her pain, fear, and determination would be put to the test. As the trial began, Alex Martinez's voice rang out clear and unwavering, outlining the systemic failure and culture of harassment at Vanguard Technologies. Olivia watched the jurors lean forward, their expressions a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Vanguard's legal team painted her as an opportunist, each accusation stinging like a physical blow. But Olivia held her head high, drawing strength from the truth she carried. The parade of witnesses brought forth a tapestry of experiences, each story adding a unique thread to the damning picture of Vanguard's toxic culture. Olivia's heart swelled with gratitude for their bravery, knowing intimately the cost of speaking out. The courtroom atmosphere shifted dramatically with the introduction of the recorded executive conversations. David Marks's callous laughter echoed off the walls as he dismissed harassment complaints, and Olivia watched shock give way to disgust on the jurors' faces. One older woman with kind eyes seemed particularly affected, her hand tightening on the armrest as David's voice sneered. As the evidence mounted, the confident smirks of Vanguard's legal team faded to tense whispers and worried glances. Even David's smug superiority began to crumble, discomfort etching itself across his face. The wait for the verdict was excruciating. Hours stretched into days, each passing moment testing Olivia's resolve. She thought of all the women who had reached out, sharing their own stories and thanking her for giving them hope. Finally, on the fourth day, word came that the jury had reached a decision. Olivia's heart pounded as she took her seat, catching Alex's reassuring nod. The foreman stood, her voice clear and steady.
In the case of Wells versus Vanguard Technologies, we find in favor of the plaintiff.
Gasps and murmurs erupted as Olivia sat stunned, tears streaming down her face. They had done it. They had taken on a corporate giant and won. As the judge read out the staggering damages, Olivia felt a weight lift from her shoulders. This wasn't just a personal victory, but a triumph for every person who had ever been silenced. Looking out at the sea of faces, Olivia knew the war for workplace equality was far from over. But for the first time in years, she felt hope. Real, tangible hope that change was possible and that her voice, along with countless others, would no longer be silenced. In the aftermath of the landmark verdict, Vanguard Technologies issued a public apology that reverberated through corporate America. Olivia stood at the podium, cameras flashing, a storm of emotions churning within her. Relief mingled with lingering anger, triumph with exhaustion. The legal battle had consumed her life for months, and now that it was over, she felt oddly adrift. As the media frenzy subsided, Olivia found herself facing a new challenge: how to move forward. Women from across the country reached out, sharing their own stories of harassment and seeking guidance. Each message served as a stark reminder of how pervasive the problem remained. An idea began to take shape in Olivia's mind, growing stronger with each passing day. She realized her journey didn't have to end with the lawsuit. With renewed determination, she threw herself into researching nonprofit organizations. She reached out to lawyers, counselors, and workplace rights advocates, building a network of experts passionate about creating lasting change. Months of meticulous planning culminated in the launch of Rise Above, Olivia's nonprofit dedicated to empowering victims of workplace harassment. The opening of their first office was a moment of triumph, tinged with the bittersweet knowledge of why such an organization was necessary. As Olivia cut the ribbon, surrounded by supporters and fellow survivors, a sense of purpose stronger than anything she had experienced before washed over her. Rise Above's impact spread quickly. Within its first year, the organization had provided legal advice to over 100 women, offered emotional support to countless others, and conducted advocacy training sessions in 5 major cities. Olivia's story, and the stories of those she helped, began to shift the conversation around workplace culture on a national scale. Companies, wary of becoming the next vanguard, started implementing more robust anti-harassment policies. Industry leaders reached out to Rise Above for guidance on creating inclusive environments. Olivia found herself speaking at conferences, consulting with HR departments, and testifying before legislative committees. As Rise Above's influence grew, Olivia saw the ripple effects of her initial stand against Vanguard spreading far beyond what she had ever imagined. Each small victory, each life touched, reinforced her belief in the power of speaking up. She had transformed her pain into purpose, her trauma into a force for change. And as she looked to the future, Olivia knew that this was only the beginning of a much larger movement, one that would reshape workplace culture for generations to come. As Olivia concluded her powerful speech, her message lingered. Recognizing, confronting, and reshaping the world to end harassment is a collective journey. Each small act can spark monumental change, just as Olivia's advocacy had inspired a movement. If you're ready to see resilience in action, click left to watch Jessica Reed's inspiring battle in Silicon Valley. A talented Black woman, Jessica defies discrimination and adversity to launch a startup that empowers women to thrive on their own terms. Or click right to follow young Olivia's heartfelt journey as she helps her grandfather rediscover forgotten memories, reminding us that love can transcend even the deepest losses. Your actions can make a difference. Watch now to be part of the change.